guys, we are back for another episode of The Lock-In, sponsored by the lovely people over at Unibet Poker. I am joined, as usual, by famed poker strategy author Dara O'Kearney. Dara, I hear the new book is, let's say, imminent. What can you tell us?
Yeah, I certainly hope it's imminent. As far as I'm concerned, I've done all my bit now. It's the rest is all in Barry. I was kind of hoping he'd get it done while I was in Barcelona, but he's been dragging his heels a little bit. So yeah, time to get out the whip on Barry. We definitely want it out by Christmas, that's for sure. Because it would, well, you know, people,
stocking stuffer.
Exactly, people buy more books in the run up to Christmas than the rest of the year. So I mean, we say this every time, like, oh, this book will be really quick because we know what we're putting in it, and then we end up taking even longer than the last book. So it is what it is.
Is this the longest one?
I think it might be. It feels like the longest anyway. I mean, I literally remember saying to Barry, I think we can knock this out in a few months because I know exactly what goes into it. But actually, like all the, well, I guess not so much like Satellite. With Satellite, the challenge was kind of like getting Barry up to speed because he was really, really terrible at poker and didn't understand any of the basic concepts. That's not the challenge anymore. He's actually become pretty accomplished as a player to the point where he goes off and runs his own sims now. And my job has kind of changed to just checking them and making sure he's drawing the right conclusions from them. But now the challenge is more, actually maybe it's a function of that now, because he's more of an equal partner on that front. There's sort of back and forth as to the best way to get the information across and what to include and what to leave out.
Well, self-effacing as usual. You mentioned there that he's an accomplished player these days. He did have a very funny tweet midweek about how it's great being a shy player because everybody wants you in their game and they queue up to hang out with you and they like you so much. Joining us this week is a great friend of the chip race. He is making, I think, his second visit to this specific show. He's been on the other show as well. He is a commentator, podcast host, and PLO specialist. He is our great friend, Henry Kilbane. Henry, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back.
We're delighted to have you back, Henry. I just heard on the grapevine that you will be joining us for the return of the Unibet Open in Malta. That's in a few weeks' time. You lived here for a short while. I can't remember how long exactly, a few years back. Are you looking forward to returning for some poker action?
Yeah, definitely. Love the rock. And your memory is correct. It was a very short stint. I think on paper, 9 months, but due to COVID, I think I only ended up living in my apartment for about 3 weeks. So yeah, a little bit of money.
I saw you during those 3 weeks, so at least I caught you once. You
did, yeah. But some money getting thrown down the drain in the form of rent for a property that I couldn't get to stay at.
Yeah, well, look, the last time you commentated a Unibet event, you started the COVID pandemic. What infectious disease are you planning on bringing with you this time?
That's right, patient zero he was.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, I remember in Dublin, we were in Dublin, right? And I was kind of like patient zero getting quarantined in some hotel room with not much information about COVID at the time. And I don't know, man, it was weird. I think none of us really took it too seriously at the time because we didn't know what it was. And then I left for America. And if I recall correctly, when I got on the plane, there had been one reported death, if I'm not mistaken, in America. And by the time I landed, so about 10 hours later, that number or the tally had gone up to like 20 confirmed people. And then the whole world kind of started locking down. It was, weird times, but all that aside, I'm really looking forward to heading back to the Unibet Opens.
Well, we are looking forward to seeing you, of course. We are keen to get to, I guess, eventually the latest poker news, gossip, and scandal. But before we do, I want to talk specifically about you, Henry. You are on a heater right now. I saw you post the other day, I think it was on Instagram, that you just had a 50K month, not too shabby. More importantly, though, you also said how you feel like you're playing very well. PLO is obviously a particularly swingy game. At this stage in your career, how good are you at discerning between the times when you're on your A game and the times you're just drilling every draw?
Honestly, that's an amazing question. It's something I've been speaking to people about a lot recently as well, because it's very easy to fall into the trap of like, wow, I'm just like playing so well. When the reality is, you just keep getting it in with 65, 70% and holding against, or there'll be on the flip side, you get in with top set against the wrap and a flush draw and the turn just pairs the board and you win infinite big blinds. So honestly, if I had to just like be completely transparent, I think I've just been on just an insane heater. If I look back at some of the hand histories that I've been discussing with my closely knit circle, there's definitely been quite a few hands that I've actually butchered and just had very favorable runouts. So trying to keep that in mind going into sessions, that, hey, you know, sure, you've been running well. That does give you a little sense of confidence going in, but not to let that confidence carry you away too much to the point where you start excusing V-pipping too wide, for example, pre-flop. That's something that I've definitely been guilty of, where I feel like I'm winning every hand, you know, every all in, I'm just, you know, just getting there. And I've definitely felt over the last week or so this sense of like entitlement tilt as well, where I'll just be getting involved in multi-way spots that I shouldn't be. And I think it's a good reminder for people to try and be realistic with themselves and not get too carried away when you are on an upswing, to not get overly confident, if you will.
That's extremely good advice. Dara, there are clearly times when we as poker players do feel a bit like Henry, when the wind's at your back and your tail is up. The best advice is usually to recenter yourself so as to avoid entitlement tilt, winner's tilt, or whatever way you want to express that. And also to repress, I guess, the temptation to jump up in stakes too quickly, because obviously with a big month comes a big roll. Dara, can you elaborate on that idea of sort of recentering yourself when times are good?
Yeah, I think this is something that football managers and sports coaches obviously know too, because anytime you watch an interview of a football team that's going really well, the manager invariably says, yeah, well, we're going really well, but we have to keep working, and we have to just focus on the next game. And when a team is running really bad, is going really badly, they tend to say, well, look, we just have to keep plugging away and the results will come. So they're always trying to get their players back to the center. I sometimes think maybe poker is just a little bit different. I mean, obviously, there are some players who are very much prone to I mean, I think there are different types of tilt, and obviously the most common one is when you're running badly and you start letting it affect your play or maybe your productivity. I've told this story before, but the first professional that I knew very well in the game, we were grinding sit and goes back in the day, and if he had a really, really bad Monday, he'd take the rest of the week off because he felt that he just wasn't in the right mindset. But if he had a really good Monday, he'd also take the rest of the week off because he was essentially like locking up his profit for the week, and he didn't want it to go. So the only time he kind of battled on was when he was running roughly break even. And I think actually for a lot of players it's kind of similar. They do find it hard to keep playing when they're on a downswing, or at least not to let it affect their game. But then there is also so-called entitlement tilt or winner's tilt or positive tilt, whatever you want to call it. When you're running well and you start also changing things, you know, as Henry mentioned, maybe you're V-pipping too wide, maybe you decide to move up in stakes, maybe you're taking more gambly spots because you think you're going to win them all. All of these things can get to you as well. I actually think I'm probably a weird third type, where actually the time I find hardest to get motivated is when I'm in a fairly prolonged, roughly break-even spell, what I call a side swing. When I'm downswinging, I'm always motivated to try and get out of the downswing and to keep grinding through it. And I never have any problem sort of showing up every day to play. And when I'm upswinging, you know, with the wind at my back, I also kind of want to keep it going as long as possible. And I feel I'm maybe making better decisions because of the fact that I'm very confident. But when I'm side swinging, it just feels incredibly boring. It's just like, well, why am I even playing? Every week I'm ending up with roughly the same amount on my accounts as the others. So I think, you know, we always say that we hate variance as poker players, but like, do we really? Like, if we could be guaranteed you are going to make your expectation every single day, would your productivity go up or down? I suspect most of would find it very boring. And I think the reason for that is poker players are people who sort of run from the real world and run from the routine of the 9-to-5 job. And if you turn poker into that, and that's kind of what a side swing is, then it loses a lot of its appeal for us.
I'm just thinking of now the fourth type, which is where you're running well and your horse is losing all the money that you've made, or vice versa. Maybe you're running badly, but your horses are bailing you out.
Oh man,
Yeah, well, actually, there's a whole bunch of dynamics there. You're running badly, they're running badly. You're running well, they're running well. They're running well, you're running badly, etc., etc. And they all provide unique challenges as well. I think that's why one of the big reasons I decided to get out of staking. It's just far too much going on there.
Yeah. Well, look, the other side of that coin is obviously running badly, and it's fair to say for most players, the downswings have a way of burning themselves into our memories a little more. Henry, some downswings are gradual and prolonged. Others can be sharp and precipitous. Recently, you spoke very openly about the latter specifically. You were presented with the opportunity to take a shot in a much bigger game than you would usually play, and it went horribly, horribly wrong. Can you tell our audience what happened?
Yeah, so it was actually a really weird dynamic. It just started off as a 5-10, 25 PLO game. Nothing to write home about, just settled in for the session. We're playing six-handed. And this reg, really good reg that I actually respect a lot, announced that he was leaving the table on his button. And it just so happened that on his button, him and the VIP ended up playing this, just like, I want to say somewhere in the realm of 4,000 big blind pot, like just something absurd. Wow. Like they just, but they're both like, bearing in mind, we're about 7-8 hours into the session. They're both incredibly deep. And he'd already announced that he was leaving. And then obviously he wins the pot and he's like, okay, be a bit, I don't want to leave. So I'm going to stay for an orbit. But after an orbit, it's kind of like, you know what? I don't owe anything to anyone. And I respect that. He's like, he did announce that he was leaving. It's like 1 a.m. and the VIP is just fuming. He's like, right, I don't want to play anymore. He's like, I only want to play this guy heads up. And the reg asked me, he's like, Henry, like, do you mind? Because I think we were like four-handed at the time. I was like, do you mind if I play him heads up? And I was like, look, bro, you won the pot. You caused the damage. Like, you earned this spot. So you play him. But then after about 20 hands, he's like, you know what? I'm not interested in playing heads up. So I said to the guy, I was like, look, I'll play heads up if you want. And he was like, okay, but I only want to play if we play 50, 100. Which, like, yeah, for me at the time was pretty irresponsible, but I was feeling pretty good. I could tell that he was obviously frustrated and he was going to make bad decisions and whatnot. And it all started off going incredibly well. Like, I think within the space of like 3 hours, so we're heading into like 3-4 a.m., I'm just up heaps against this guy. And we've uncapped the buy-in. So he just kept going to the cash desk, just buying in to cover me, going to the cash desk, buying in to cover me. And I'm just like, well, I just can't quit this guy. But the issue with that is his pockets are infinitely deeper than mine. And we're playing a game that obviously, equities can run incredibly close in Omaha. He's at very aggressive pre-flop. So the SPR, even though we're deep, is just getting reduced significantly compared to a normal game. And I remember like making a couple of just what felt like close calls against him, like where I just kind of stationed him. In reality, it's probably just like very easy folds on my part. But after like making a couple of these like close calls in my mind, started losing my grip a little bit on him, and he kind of ended up winning the mental war, if you will, because I just don't know. It was a mix of like ego, entitlement. I was just like, hang on, like I'm the one that's meant to be, like, I'm meant to have an edge here. He seems to be getting the better of me. And bearing in mind at this point, I was still actually up against him. But fast forward, 5-6 hours, he got me good. He got me for about 80% of my bankroll at the time. And I remember speaking to Espen like literally an hour after, heading back to my hotel room with my tail between my legs kind of thing. And Espen's response was just like, well, that's just super irresponsible. Like, why would you not like message me or other people to buy some action? I was like, dude, it's like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning. Like, I can't just, because like we have, auto books in place for certain stakes or certain games where like, if I deem a game to be really good, but I don't want to take 100% of my action, I have people that will have auto books. But this was a game that was 10x the stakes that I'm normally playing. you know, so I can't just like text Espen the next day, be like, hey, bud, by the way, I auto booked you for 30% in a game that's 10x my normal stakes. You now owe me 20K or 30K or whatever it was. So yeah, like looking back, super irresponsible. And I remember at the time, kind of, again, just like from an ego point of view, just realizing, because I was trying to, this like false sense of bravado, if you will. It's like, yeah, I would take the spot again. It was such a good spot. But after thinking about it, it's like, actually, how good of a spot was it? You know, like you're playing a very high variance game. This guy has deeper pockets than you. He can continue to reload. Like eventually his 30% is going to get there for 1,000 big blind pot, a 2,000 big blind pot. And he can afford to keep on putting himself in those spots where his 30% is going to get there. I can't. And yeah, it was a pretty painful lesson to learn, I guess. But yeah, looking back, I definitely wouldn't recommend it.
No, indeed. No. Well, Dara, down the years, we've interviewed guests with wildly different opinions on the subject of shot taking. I remember a Bluff article by WSOP runner-up Paul Wasika from the mid-2000s where he talked about the importance of shot taking. And I remember thinking, yeah, easy for you to say, mate, when it worked out so well. From a pure Kelly criteria point of view, it is clearly correct to take on more risk if you have a larger edge, but it's easy to get carried away as Henry did there. What did you think when you first heard Henry's story? Did you think, yeah, you know, he's young, it's the right time to gamble? Or did you think, oh no, he's just blown heaps of his hard-earned money? I got to say, I was in the latter camp and I was really upset for him.
Yeah, I probably felt a bit of both, to be honest. Like if you are going to be irresponsible and gamble, doing it while you're young and you don't yet have the family responsibilities and all that stuff is definitely the time to do it. And it's also the time when you have the most upside, because if it does go very well, you have more years ahead of you with that increased bankroll to take advantage of it. You know, whereas like if I took a shot now, you know, I could die next year and then it hasn't really helped all that much. So plus I also have all the family responsibilities. So yeah, I mean, I'm fairly sympathetic to the idea that it's fine to take a shot when you're young, so long as it's not going to completely wipe you out. I think you kind of have to weigh it up as a sort of a time thing, like how much, if this goes badly, how much time do I lose getting back to where I am now? Compared to like how much can I gain if it goes well? How, you know, will it jump me forward 2 years in my development if I just keep on at the pace I'm going? And like that's kind of the ICM calculation. If it's going to take you 2 years to rebuild and you're only jumping forward a year, then it's a bad shot. But if you're going to jump forward 3 years and you will be able to rebuild in a lot less than that, then it seems like a reasonable shot.
Yeah, that's some really solid points, and that those were the arguments from some other people. I mean, Espen's a little bit more on the nittier side when it comes to like bankroll management, but I spoke to other friends as well, and they basically reiterated exactly what you said, in the sense that like, look, I think I was 26 at the time. It was like a shot that I'd never been in a position to take before, and obviously had it gone well, you know, all of a sudden I'm, you know, rolled to start playing, or, you know, at least shot taking 25-50 a lot more regularly, compared to like the 5-10 games that I'd been in. And, you know, we live in a really interesting industry where you always hear about the shots that went well. For the most part, you rarely hear about the shots where people took the shots and completely missed. And that's why I always just try and be as transparent as possible with like where I'm at, because I don't want to give people this like, I don't know, I think as like poker players are pretty guilty of only showing the upsides. It's something that I really admire Dara for, actually, is, you know, when it comes to posting Saturday or Sunday results, you know, Dara will always be transparent about, look, I've actually had a really bad month, managed to finally get out of it, you know, this month because of this Sunday session. And I think that's what people should try and do with themselves, is firstly to be more honest with themselves about how they're running, but also to be, you know, honest with everyone else, like their peers and people in the industry.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Like the thing is, like the people whose shots go badly, they tend to just disappear from the game, and we don't think about them. And except maybe 6 years later, we think, okay, I wonder whatever happened to. But
Paul Wassica, where is he now?
Yeah, exactly. Where Paul Wassica now? But I guess I'm probably more conscious of this than most, because I have had some very close friends who basically took their way out of their profession, and ended up completely broke and at a point where they either couldn't rebuild or they just didn't have the motivation to do it for the umpteenth time. It can become a vicious cycle as well. Like I think it's fine to take one or two shots, but there are some guys who just take every shot, and they're perpetually going back to bust, and then they have to rebuild. And then you really wonder, like, what is the game? People used to say that about Stu Unger, that like no matter how much he won, he would never take money out of the game, that it always just went into the bankroll, and essentially therefore no matter how much he won, he didn't really win. All he was winning was the ability to go on playing poker.
Yeah, that's very true. And I also, just like something to note as well for transparency reasons, is I'm in a slightly more privileged spot to aggressively shot take, in the sense that I have like variance-free income in the form of commentary and stuff like that. So like I think I've definitely been more on the aggro side with shot taking throughout my career, because I've always had that safety net, if you will. It's like, okay, well, if this shot doesn't go well, okay, yeah, sure, I'm down to sub 5 figures. But I can just grind commentary for the next 6 months and rebuild and then go from there, which isn't a luxury that other people have. So I definitely need to kind of keep that in mind as well, and try and be more honest with my shot taking, that I'm not falling into that trap.
Yeah, I think Henry's done a very good job, and a lot of young players could look at the example of Henry of building this other income. Like that is vital. Like I was much more aggressive in my Vegas campaign this year, for example, kept much bigger pieces of myself, and in terms of the pieces of other people I took, and a large part of that was I'm at a point now where the other income streams are the highest they've ever been. So like even if I have a bad Vegas, it's not a case that I'm going to have to go back and grind $5 tournaments to get it back. But I think that is something young players in particular should be mindful of. If you can develop those other income streams, they're not just income, and often they'll say, oh yeah, but it's like less glamorous, you're making X an hour and I can win 100 times that in one pot, and that's part of the mental difficulty of sometimes taking that other income. But Henry seems to have his head screwed on this front.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like as well the idea of being honest about it, this kind of warts and all, this is the industry. Obviously, Henry, you're a content creator, as are we, and I suppose it benefits us to always talk about what we're going through, and it wouldn't make sense if we were just talking about when we were winning, because clearly there are loads of periods of times during an average year where you're losing. So talking about that as well, I think actually makes it kind of compelling for people who follow your career or follow your content as well. I think there is a sort of, I'm following the journey, the roller coaster of it, up and down. They might be rooting for us, they might be rooting against us, but whatever it is, there is a sort of a sense of like, this is a real story of this person's journey in the poker world, where I think if you are the type of content creator or poker player who puts out social media posts only really talking about their successes, without maybe showing the other side of it too, there's a huge danger that nobody just takes you that seriously and never has a great sense of like that you're telling the truth, or that it's a real journey anyway. Speaking of content creation, I want to move on to one of the news stories that I guess is not very specifically like this week's news story, but it's sort of a general thing that's coming in, and I guess it has a couple of touch points in the last week or two, and it's live stream poker. Clearly, live stream poker cash games are the talk of the town right now. Between Hustler Casino and Live at the Bike over in the US, there is a really big investment and resurgence in televised cash game action at the moment. Last week was Phil Hellmuth week at Live at the Bike, and bizarrely, the poker bra short stacked throughout. While technically there's nothing wrong with buying in for the minimum to a cash game, there are actually some strategic advantages to doing so. It is against the spirit of a week, specifically one billed after your name as the headline act to do so. During the week, of course, we were treated to some classic Hellmuth rants, a war of words between him and, I guess, a new kid on the block in terms of big personalities in the poker world, Eric Persson. And when the feedback got back to Hellmuth that his short stacking was not going down very well, we got this rather bizarre speech from him promising to buy in for larger amounts of his own money, definitely his own money, in future games. Henry, this renewed interest in live stream cash is clearly great for the game. On the other channel, so to speak, of that sort of live stream coin, Hustler's stream featured a super high stakes game with a host of regulars, including Alex Keating, who received mostly positive reviews for his splashy willingness to give action and, I guess, general table demeanor too, although he is a polarizing,
Alan,
I will admit.
Alan Keating.
Oh, Alan Keating. I'm sorry. Thank you, Alan. Yes, sorry.
No
apologies, Alan. No, that is his name. Sorry. Clearly, these streams bring a lot of eyes to poker. They probably, on a good day, create a bit of a Wimbledon effect, get more people playing, and I suppose it's as close to what is realistic these days as the late night TV poker shows on TV, that we used to watch when we were coming up. As a commentator, what do you look for in a lineup? What's the right mix of personality, good play, big pots, that sort of, those sort of ingredients?
Well, I think verbal jousting it really plays a massive role in these types of lineups. Like, you don't want a table full of people that just aren't really engaging or needling or whatever it is, just like conversations and these kind of, how do I want to phrase this? Like, something that I think Hustler has done really well is they've created these quote unquote rivalries, if you will, between some of the players. And I think people or viewers, consumers of content, that's what they get invested in the most. It's like, same in like football, tennis, like you have a fan favorite, you have these rivalries, and people want to watch to find out, is the fan favorite going to get the best of the villain again, or is it the villain's turn to, put a beat on a fan favorite? And I think that's something that Hustler have just done so well, is just focusing on the personalities that they have. Garrett, Wesley, Alan, to name a few, Andy, all of these guys, just great personalities. I would love to see more of it on our side of the pond. I think we have the venues to do it. We have the production arms to do it. We have the players to do it as well. I'm kind of surprised that nobody's pulled the trigger yet, because I would love to see it done over here. We have same bunch of characters that are willing to play high stakes poker and put on a great show for us. And I think the reason it hasn't happened yet is because obviously there is a lot of politics involved, unfortunately, in these high stakes games. It's not just a case of showing up with $500,000 in cash. That doesn't automatically get you a seat. So yeah, I would like to see something done in Europe, but also I'm aware that there's a lot of politics that unfortunately still plays a part in these higher stakes games.
I can absolutely imagine you commentating on such a game, and I hope they do manifest. Dara, Hustler clearly have a vision, sort of outlined there a bit by Henry, and they are going about their business with an eye on ratings. Can that be taken too far, though, or is this just sort of reality TV now, where the more sensationally it gets, the better? I suppose what I'm saying is, while TV poker has to be entertaining and engaging, and that requires some amount of conflict, as Henry mentioned, the rivalries play into that perfectly. Do live streams, in the pursuit of audience numbers, run the risk of bringing the game into disrepute?
I mean, obviously everything can be taken too far, but I don't think Hustler have gone anywhere up near the line. From my perspective, everything I've seen of them has been fine. I think Henry touched on a good point there, which is that they have good characters. Now, I think they've actually created those characters. I think the producer's done an amazing job, just the way they frame it all. They clearly have a very clear idea of what the different characters are. The characters are essentially made by producers. And, we've had this conversation before about why is poker not producing so many characters anymore, like back in the golden era of TV. But in the golden era of TV, it was the TV producers who decided essentially that Helmut's going to be the poker brat and Dean Eggs is going to be the chatty kid poker at the table, etc., etc. And they cast all these almost cartoonesque characters, but characters that people could decide who they wanted to root for based on their own personality. And they have done that, and also the conflict is also very good. But I think one thing which maybe is not getting enough attention is just the stakes are super important. It's something that poker seems to just constantly lose sight of, is that people are always really interested when there's a lot of money on the line. The average player in the street, if you tell them, first prize in a tournament is 10,000 compared to first prize is 10 million, they're going to be far more interested in the second one, and it really doesn't matter who the players are. But given that they are going to have the same cast of characters over and over again, they have done a very good job of creating the different characters. So I think they've gone about it perfectly, and they are reaping the rewards of that. As to why it's not happening on this side, I mean, again, I think Henry's right. Like, there's a certain amount of politics as well, but I think also, this is more of maybe more of a tournament scene. There's a lot more tournament streams, let's say, from Europe than there are from the States. So that's kind of scratching that itch in a sense. There's a lot more big tournaments, let's say, that people can watch and see people playing for a lot of money for. Whereas that's once you get past the WSOP and the WPTs, there's not too much of that in the States.
I think you touched on something really important there, which was the role of the producers. Clearly, whether it's Maury Eskandani and the sort of shows he's historically put on, and, clearly he still works with Poker Go and those people, and they put on shows all the time as well. These guys are giving them a run for their money. Vertucci, I think, is involved in the production of one of those shows. I can't remember which one. And, Feldman's involved in the production of one of the others. They're poker people. They know the game. They understand character, but they clearly, and I don't know what any of their backgrounds are, but they clearly have some sort of narrative understanding too. Like you said, creating characters, making sure the commentators know what to emphasize. I think that's a big part of the way they can lead it. If they get the commentators to sort of say, prep them ahead of time, going, well, if him and him get into a pot together, really amp up, any personal beef, or remind the audience of the last hand they played or whatever it is. I think that's all, emphasizing the right stuff, because it's very easy to watch live TV cash game poker and find it utterly boring as people just have their bit of table talk and nothing. I think the commentary and the production, and as you said, where the emphasis goes on, can be massive and really, really sort of enrich the story aspect. That is what ultimately I think people cling on to. Henry, any final points on that? Any final thoughts on sort of like, if you were given that role as either commentator or producer of something like that in Europe, let's say, with a cast of maybe European based people, who would you pick first of all, or who would be on your top of your list to have in there? And I suppose, like, how much of the conflict would you want to be part of it?
I honestly think you guys just hit the nail on the head in how important it is to have a producer and a production team at the helm that really understand poker. And I think that's where a lot of other companies have, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, have tried and failed. And it's now allowed Ryan, who was a professional poker player before getting involved with Live at the Bike, then had the dispute with Live at the Bike, moved over to Hustler, but he understands the LA private game scene really well. He understands what sells. He knows how to sell poker. He knows how to create these storylines, these narratives, and I'm sure he's there, having discussions with clear directions for the commentators to, really focus in on certain things when there are, certain players involved. And on top of that, they just have a really good social media team as well. They've got all of these funny graphics, these memes. They understand internet culture, and I think when you have that all packaged under one roof, it's always going to be a success. I mean, look at their Max Payne Monday. It's what, 10% of the stakes that Garrett and those guys play. I think it's like a 10, 20, 40 game, and even that is getting 10, 11,000 viewers whenever they go live. So I think in Europe, if it was to happen, just take a couple of micro influencers, if you will, some of the people that already have a bit of a following. It's really easy to generate rivalries between, social media influencers or poker influencers, if you will. Bring in a couple of VIPs, obviously, that don't mind splashing around and are happy to compete. And I think it would work on the European side as well.
Very good. Well, moving on now. The Goliath is on right now in Coventry. Beautiful Coventry. Dara, we're very fond of the Midlands here on this show. No, we've never said a bad thing about Nottingham, Coventry, Birmingham, or anything of the sort.
No.
We saw our pal Jack Hardcastle take down the GUKPT that is attached to this festival. A second GUKPT title, I think, now for the man we predicted would be one to watch many, many years ago. Jack also has a couple of WPT titles and an 888 title, plus heaps of final table finishes already in his short enough career. Henry, you are also good friends with Jack. I know you guys have traveled together. I know he was having a fairly brutal Vegas, but clearly he's righted his path now. What, in your opinion, makes Jack so good?
I think with Jack, he's just absolutely relentless when it comes to pulling the trigger in spots, especially in like he really understands pain thresholds of recreationals really well. And I think it's something that a lot of pros that are maybe new to the live scene really don't hone in on enough. I feel like maybe Dara would probably be more better versed to comment on this, but something that hand histories that I've heard from Jack, where he'll just really put people in the bin. Like he'll just like, when a recreational caps themselves on the turn, he's not going for, the 80% probe on the river. He's going for the 4x pot and putting them to the test for all of their chips. And when you are that relentless and you just don't have, you're not fearful when it comes to pulling the trigger, especially against that player type, I think that's what puts him in such a prime spot to build a stack early on, then approach the bubble with a very playable stack, and then obviously abuse the bubble a lot more. And he just puts himself in a position where he either busts very early in day one, which you'll hear him seething about on Instagram or Twitter, on Instagram. Or, he'll approach the bubble when he's top 10 in chips. And then after the bubble, he's top 5 because he's just relentless when it comes to really putting people to the test for their tournament life. And I think that's a skill set that a lot of the online guys struggle with when it comes to adjusting to the live environment.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like he understands the live exploits really, really well. Dara, I'm flashing back now in my mind to a night with a young Jack and his friend in Brighton, circa, I want to say maybe early 2019. As I recall, we paid for all the pints that night because at that point he had accumulated a paltry 52k in live tournament winnings. Today, that number is over 1.3 million. I think it's fair to point out that his heater began right after that encounter with us, right?
If you want to put it down to the pints, yeah, then that's fine. This is also around.
I would have said the conversation. Over
I was
the
actually
pints.
working with Jack with doing a lot of solver work, and I think actually Jack is a bit of a misunderstood player. People think he's this mad exploit live player, etc., etc. Jack crushes online as well when he gives it attention. And actually, when you break down a lot of Jack's plays, they're very much solver approved. I think people often misunderstand solvers and think they encourage you to play in a really boring, cautious style, but that really is not the case. I was absolutely thrilled to watch the heads up. Like Jack absolutely crushed the heads up. He played so well, but again, like there wasn't a single spot where I was thinking, oh, the solver wouldn't do that. There was one hand, for example, where he double barreled the nut low, and then he still had the nut low on the river, and he went for the 4x pot. And I thought, yeah, the solver would absolutely love this because the other guy has capped his range by not raising at any point, and actually he got the guy to fold 2 pair, which is pretty astonishing. That
wow.
That would have been a real turning point. He would have been down to fumes had he been called. But he also has that fearlessness. And, Jack would admit himself, he kind of boasts about the fact that he's never run a sim in his life. But that's because he gets other people to do it for him, basically.
Yeah.
And the other person will go back and say, yeah, the solver does this because of this. And Jack is very good at internalizing the reasons, the heuristics, rather than just like staring at solver output and trying to memorize it. And he is that new generation of player who they have come from solver learning, but it's not just rote and repetition. It's literally it's a deeper understanding of poker that comes from understanding why the output is the way that it is. And I spoke to Jack almost immediately after he'd won, and he's not a humble man. I think I played absolutely flawlessly with him. And I kind of had to agree. Like he just plays so well these days, and he gets himself, when he gets into these spots, like he's just not going to make a mistake. That's the great thing about Jack. His confidence bordering on arrogance is actually a good thing, because he's sort of like, there's no self-doubt in his mind. He's just going to go for it.
I'm glad someone said it.
It sounds like one of the key things to do is get yourself a sim butler. Is that
sim butler? Yeah, and he has a pile of sim butlers. I mean, Jack takes a pile of people guys who are very, very good at solvers, and he's sort of just, all the information flows up to the Jack Daddy.
Go on. Sorry, Henry, I could have crossed you there.
No, I just said I'm glad Dara said it, because I was going to say, he likes to go around pretending like he hasn't touched the sim, but he's got a lot of people looking at spots for sure.
Yeah, he's probably an equal number of sim and burgers, or photos, Instagram photos of burgers that he's at.
Yeah, all about that healthy lifestyle for sure.
I know, right? Look, back to the Goliath. This is one of the great low stakes, huge field festivals. It's massively popular with the recreationals in the UK and beyond. And I'm pretty sure it has broken all its own records once again. Our very good pal and former guest of this show, Katie Swift, hosted a record-breaking ladies event featuring, I think it was 219 or 216 players. Dara, you could probably let me know. I think you sent me the message telling me about that huge number. These kinds of festivals are really, really important for grassroots poker. The equivalent sort of event in Ireland each year is the IPO, and I'm delighted to say that this week, Unibet Poker have confirmed their partnership with the IPO, which will be held in the Bonington Hotel over Halloween week. That's its normal slot. Dara, talk a little bit about the importance of grassroots poker. It's obviously part of the lifeblood of poker, really.
Yeah, well, I mean, it always has been, but the last few years have obviously been interesting, and that there's been no live poker. And we've all been aware of the online boom that came particularly at the start of the pandemic, where loads of bored people at home decided, oh, maybe I'll try online poker again. The thing which surprised me when I started playing again at the sort of grassroots level in Ireland was just how many new players there are. A lot of these guys, I guess, are guys who played online during the thing and now want to play live. They're coming in at a much lower level than, they're not jumping straight into the 1K level. They basically want to play lower buy-ins. The other thing I noticed was that lots of guys who I hadn't seen in 10 years and I thought had quit the game we're actually back again. It's almost like the pandemic made them realize, you can't take anything for granted anymore. Live poker might not always be there. So that it sort of reignited their desire to play poker. So, I've been at a few grassroots events here in Ireland. The Irish Poker Tour in particular is really taking off. And unusually for tournaments in Ireland, when I sit down at a table, I don't recognize most of the players there. Because they're new players, and similarly, they have no idea who I am.
Will you stop? Of course they do.
No, seriously, they absolutely don't. Which is kind of refreshing. It reminds me of being back to the start of my career, just being another Joe at the table. But there's also a great atmosphere among the new players. Like, they're all fresh. They all still have that early enthusiasm for the game, and I think we're going to see a boom in live tournament poker in Europe that will sustain for a few years, because a few of these players will get better. They'll move up in stakes and they'll become regulars in the 500s and 1000s, et cetera, et cetera. We saw Barcelona break all records as well, which we talked about in our show from Barcelona. And I think we're going to see a real boom time, and we are going to see an influx of new players.
Well, Henry, speaking of Unibet sponsored events, I want to segue back briefly to the Unibet Open, which is in just a few weeks' time. While this one is obviously an 1100 buy-in, it's not exactly a grassroots buy-in. There is, without doubt, a sort of grassroots, sort of maybe community vibe is a better word for the Unibet Opens. Players have been satelliting into this one for months now. Feeders start for as little as €1. There are going to be a couple of stories of people who've sort of ridden the satellite train all the way to that kind of thing. The satellites have broken records, and clearly this is one where there's hunger, because even though there have been other live events for the last year or more, Unibet haven't had a live event except for this week in Belgium and the upcoming Unibet Open. So clearly, maybe people who are loyal to our site have not actually had their little taste of the live scene. Talk a little bit maybe for me about the importance of fostering that notion of community in poker. You obviously being in the Twitch streets and sort of in a lot of different maybe Discord communities and whatnot are probably very well placed, maybe better than Dara and I, to understand how that sort of works organically in the modern poker landscape.
Well, I think it's something that Unibet have always done exceptionally well, and not just Unibet, but the not to blow smoke up your asses, but the ambassadors as well. Because you look, if you think back to when you first started playing poker, or if I look back to like when I first started playing, it could be a very intimidating experience. You know, like you drive to a casino, you've got X amount of money that you want to play, you know, a cash game or a tournament with, and it's intimidating. And that community aspect that Unibet have created in both the online streaming platforms, through the online streaming platforms that you have access to, as well as the actual community sites and the ongoing like free rolls and satellites, it gives people just that little bit of, you know, I don't really know how to phrase it. Like, it's not sense of security, but you have people that you can communicate to. You know, it feels like a lot more friendlier environment, even though poker is obviously extremely competitive. And when you have that, and you can go to an event, and there's people you can talk to and catch up with, and it's not all just, you know, intense poker. I think it really opens up the doors to a much more pleasant experience, especially for new people, compared to other, you know, there are other events where you go and you look around your table, you've got 6 young Europeans with headphones and hoodies. And if you're venturing out for the first time, I don't think that type of experience is going to be something you're looking to come back to. And I think that's something that Unibet have done incredibly well over the years. And I'm looking forward to it for exactly that reason, because it's not, it's just not that same, you know, intense atmosphere, if you will. It's just a lot more friendlier and a lot more open, and I love it for that.
Yeah, 2 points there that I really want to emphasize you picked up on is, like, firstly, it can be a lonely old game if you're just going off on your own to play. You know, some people quite like their own company and maybe don't mind it. Sure. But if you are a more, you know, social person and you don't have pals on the circle and you don't have an existing community, maybe going to the live event that you're going to, it can be lonely just sitting there having the dinner breaks on your own or whatever. So I'm sure that's hugely valued. Also, absolutely right, the intimidating factor. We've all been, you know, new to poker at one time. And you walk into a poker room and everything's at hyper speed and it's got its own lingo and, you know, everyone else seems to know each other. That can be a very intimidating atmosphere. So if you're already embedded with an online community and then you can sort of put the face to the name, that's a really nice way in as well. I think you've hit on a couple of good points. Is that the reason, pray tell, Henry, why you now being, you know, a commentator of such illustrious tours like Triton, where I imagine they must pay you, I'm going to guess ballpark $5,000 a day, you're still willing to, you know, come down into the trenches with Dara and I for a Unibet Open and all the Unibet community?
Honestly, I think something that I learned pretty early on is what you just mentioned, is that for a lot of people, poker is a social experience. And when you understand that, and you understand that people, like, so my parents, for example, the way they socialize, they go and play bingo. You know, they take a couple of £100 a week and they'll go and play bingo. And for a lot of people, poker is their bingo. It is their night out down the pub, you know, having a few drinks with some friends over a friendly game of cards. And yeah, you know, I think that's something that I've like really tried to emphasize to other professionals, young professionals, that sometimes take themselves a little too seriously, especially when a recreational will try and strike up a conversation. Look, mate, you know, you don't need to approach every spot in your career through the lens of how can I extract the most EV, you know, by not responding to the 50-year-old who's down here playing a 500 for the first time in 6 months. Just engage in the conversation, take the headphones off. And yeah, that's one of the reasons why I enjoy coming down. And also the other reason is, you know, as you mentioned about Jack back in 2019, you bought him a few drinks and then his career seemed to just go on like an insane upswing. It's the same story for me. Are you
cheap race run good? It's a real thing, isn't it, Dara?
Yeah, exactly. You brought me a couple of G&Ts in some musky room in Bratislava many years ago, and it's all been uphill since then. So yeah, it's always nice to come down and just support the tour that you guys have got going on, and obviously just assist in any way that I can.
Yeah, we are the Forrest Gumps of, world poker. We're well, I am anyway. Dara has proper achievements. I'm just the one who's like nearby when everyone else is doing very well. So I'm the Forrest Gump. I want to also point out, Dara, and you may have noticed this, there was no denial that he was paid $5,000 a day by Triton there.
Yeah, you're very keen to find out what people are paid.
I want to know how much they get. I know how much they pay me to commentate.
I remember at the start you used to tell me, don't worry what other people have in their bowls, and that was the way you used to phrase it. But it seems that these days you're just all about poking in other people's bowls. But yeah, I mean, obviously this is the first Unibet Open that's back in several years live, and I'm really looking forward to it. They are absolutely unique events. Sometimes you go to events and you're really not sure how they're going to be, how social people are going to be. For example, I enjoyed EPT Barcelona a lot, but it's not the most social event in the world. You have lots of different nationalities there, and most people are there just for the poker and they don't really want to talk. And I actually think that's an important thing about an ambassador too. Probably the best advice I ever received on this didn't come from another poker player, but came from a dealer, one of the best dealers I know, Danny Petku. Shout out to Danny. And she told me that one of the keys of being a good dealer is to sort of mirror back what the players are feeling and how they're behaving. In other words, if they're quiet, you be quiet. If they're chatty, you be chatty. If they're sad, you look sad. If they're happy, you be happy, etc. The last thing they want is they're steaming over a bad beat and the dealer's beaming broadly at them. So I thought that was very good advice, and that's generally what I do when I go to a table. You just try and read the room, see if people are in the mood to talk, or if they're not. And if they're not, you shouldn't really force it down their throats. It's like, well, we're all here now, we're all absolutely have to talk. Some people absolutely hate the enforced socialization of poker, and they just really want to be in their own little world. Shout out to my friend Carlos Welch on that. He definitely takes that to the extreme. So yeah, it's all about just kind of reading the room and knowing who you're surrounded with. But at Unibet Opens, you generally don't have to do that because everybody's there just to have a good time, and they are fairly raucous events.
I'm not sure, Dara. I've definitely sat at the table with you where I was in a very bad humor, and you've taken great glee in the fact that I was in miserable humor.
Yeah, you don't count. I mean, you're not. You are not the target audience.
Valuable soft skills that you mentioned there for sure, Dara. Yeah, they're very solid.
Absolutely. And on this one, shout out to Natalie Sopatko-Peru, who's putting in a Trojan bit of work to get this one woman show up and running. I think it's going to be a really good event. Record numbers for Malta, almost certainly going to be there given the satellite numbers we're seeing. And I think people coming from as far away. And I know we'd want to get the shout out there. That's why I'm bringing up people coming from Australia. Jesse McKenzie, I know, is on the way over, but also Jan Sokanic, friend of the shows.
Yeah, I mean, technically Jan's coming from New Zealand where he lives. I think he's a fugitive from the law or something, so he's actually risking life and limb coming. But actually he's just been touring around enjoying the billionaire lifestyle. He's been touring Europe for the last few months, and he's deigning to join us in Malta, which I'm very much looking forward to, because I haven't seen the grumpy old bollocks in several years. He didn't do Vegas, either of the last two Vegases that we were at.
I heard he was down to his last billion, Dara.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, Jan is a funny guy. He told me recently that his investments weren't going well, and I said to him, well, how badly are they going? He said, well, I could end up like a pauper, and I was like, they can't possibly be that bad. And he said, okay, just to clarify, I mean a pauper like you, not an actual pauper. So, yeah, looking forward to also Jesse. I think the last time I saw Jesse was actually no, I would have seen him at the Aussie Million since, but the last time we saw him together was Prague several years ago. Also a great guy to hang out with. And I also want to reaffirm your shout out to Natalie. Unibet used to have an amazing live events team. Natalie's the only one left now, so I feel really sorry for her going into having to do the entire Unibet Open on her own. I know she'll rise to the occasion, but yeah, I don't envy her job.
Can I give one final shout out to something I'm doing, and I'm putting it on camera now so that I actually have to finish following through, because I've written it all up, but I have to sort of maybe make it look nice on a web page or something. I'm going to do a visitor's guide, a poker player's guide to Malta, but it'll be very narrow and specific to just things I like. So it's basically going to be gin bars, mezcal bars, restaurants, some cheap and cheerful, some a bit fancier, and maybe some nightclubs as well, some bars. I just want to give people a sort of maybe a friendly user's guide to maybe some of the stuff, help them avoid some of the more treacherous paths in Malta, because it is a mixed bag. You can go down the wrong street in Malta and all the places are terrible, but you can also go down the right street and find loads of nice restaurants and good things. So I'm going to try to have that up on some form of web page in the weeks before the event, so maybe people can decide, you know, if they do have time off the table, that they can find a nice restaurant or a nice bar to go to. And they'll definitely have set foot in somewhere that I was, and that they can ask for me, and they will probably receive a blank look from the waiter or whoever it is until they explain it's the Irish guy who, you know, comes in here all the time, and then they'll remember, and then you probably won't get great service, to be honest, after that. Anyway, September is traditionally a month of big online series. We're just entering September as we record this. We'll probably be in September when it's out. And we've got another series coming up on Unibet Poker. This is a very, Dara, you told me this was a very shilly episode when you saw the notes. And I
believe like my exact phrase was
shilly. Third thing now. I usually only have one thing that I'm apologies, guys. This is very shilly. Do you know what? Sebastian's going to love this. Sebastian loves the shill and has told me we need to shill more. So maybe I'm, you know, subliminally it's working now, and I'm getting it out of my system in this one go. Anyway, we have a Unibet Online Series, but I do want to shout a bit extra about it because it's a sort of a turbo edition. Not that it's turbo tournaments, but it's shorter. We're calling it the Lightning Series. And it will be just 8 days of UOS action rather than 15, which I personally prefer because I can really commit to an 8-day schedule for leaderboards and stuff like that. I think those 15-day ones can be a bit grueling, although if we go back to the 15-day ones, they're not grueling, and I take it back, and I actually think that they're the best ones, and I'll say that then because I'm shilling. No, seriously though, there will be leaderboards at the low, medium, high level. Overall leaderboard will crown the series champion. Dara, are you looking forward to this one? You have to say yes. Sebastian's listening.
Well, I would have said yes anyway, even if Sebastian wasn't listening. But making Sebastian happy is always a good thing as well. So
he's the senior, he's senior marketing now. He's been given a promotion. Shout out!
Oh well, Sebastian is great at his job. So I'm also delighted to hear that he's been promoted. You keep up on these things much more than I do. But yeah, I like the 8-day series, although to be honest, I'm committing to a lot of live poker between now and Unibet Open. I warned my wife. She's very much enjoyed me lying on the couch this week, watching Breaking Bad with her, or rewatching Breaking Bad as we are. I told her, you probably just, we're going to be back to just you bringing my meals at my desk for a month. So you're going to have to get used to that next week. So, but yeah, very much. I mean, the 8-day series is nice. You can definitely, you know, even lazy bollockses like you can commit to 8 days.
Exactly.
But yeah, there's a lot of online poker. Online poker has become sort of a bit seasonal now, where you can take breaks where there's not much happening. And then you can go into other periods where there are lots of series, and all the sites are tending to coordinate their series as well, which they've kind of worked out is obviously for their own benefit. So yeah, very exciting month of online poker coming up, and you know we've also got a preview of things to come after the series on Unibet. Maybe we're not supposed to talk about it yet, but I think we are personally very excited about what Unibet are planning on the tournament front, and we'll probably talk/shill more about that in future.
Tea/leak as well. Well, I didn't do the leaking this time, or at least get the juices flowing. Final question to you, Henry. Are you going to be playing some online in the month of September, or are you going to continue the live grind?
Yeah, unfortunately, no, not going to be playing online. Going to be in Cyprus for Triton until like the 20th, and then I'm coming to join you guys end of September. So, but listen, you keep shilling the way that you are. You show yourself to that 5K a day, that day rate that you're after. So
one day I'll get there.
And if you're overly concerned about me underselling my 5K a day rate by joining you guys in Malta, we can always just set up, you know, a friendly 5-10 PLO cash game or something to get me out of the hole.
Well, if we do, I'll be short stacking it like Hellmuth. So
brilliant.
That's called that. By the way, that's called a callback for anybody.
That is. That was well played.
That was unrehearsed, but that was just a natural callback.
Well played.
Brings the whole show. That's you should get paid $5,000 a day for quality callbacks like that. Okay, it remains for me to thank you, Henry Kilbane. Best of luck in Cyprus. I hope it all goes really well for you. I hope the heater continues, and don't be jumping into any big nosebleed games.
Yeah, hopefully I can tame myself, because some of these games here look absolutely insane, mate. But we'll see. Good
stuff. And Dara O'Kearney, thank you as always.
Thank you, David. Yep, this was fun, even if it was very chilly.
Bop. Okay, good.
Cool. Where are you at the moment, Henry?
So